Hello, and welcome. It's Shondell here from Life Puzzle. I'm just coming live into the group to share with you guys how can you make more sales to the right kinds of clients and really unblock your pipeline. I think that there's been a lot of people commenting on the fact that, post-pandemic and a lot of the different things that have been going on in our society and certainly around elections and various different things, that there is definitely a feeling among a lot of sales teams and sales professionals, and even some of the conversations that I've had with sales managers as well, that there's a different vibe in terms of people being able to produce business at the moment. So today I want to share with you a bunch of tips around how you can unblock your sales pipeline and how you can speak to more of your ideal clients right now and have the relationships that you really want to build with them. And so if you're watching this on the page, then I really want to encourage you to go ahead and comment below. We've got a bunch of workbooks and things like that I'm going to be going through today. So if you'd like to get access to the workbook so that you can take some notes and really get the value out of this training, then go ahead and pop a comment below and just say workbook, and we'll make sure that we get that off to you. Or if you're watching this on my page, then all you need to do is just go ahead and click the button below and we'll make sure that we get that out to you. So as we get into today's session, one of the things that I really want to cover off on is, how do we make more sales to ideal clients and really open the door and overcome the objections that we're seeking, whether they be objections from within yourself or whether they be objections from outside buyers and parties, or maybe even within your team. So if you're a business owner and you have people in your team that make sales as well as you, then this is certainly a few things that you can apply in the context of the way that you deal with your team. If you're a sales professional and you're out there, doing the do, getting the business, and you're finding that you're not getting the same kind of traction that you would normally do, then this is definitely something for you. And so as we get into today's session, the first thing that I want to cover off on is a little bit of a wake-up call for you. And so I'm going to share with you the 5 signs that potentially you're getting in the way of your own success. And for those of you that might be meeting me for the first time here, one of the things that we say at Life Puzzle is that sales is the number one life skill. And we believe that there are 3 important sales that we make. The first one is the one we make to ourselves, which is about our worth, our value, our confidence in our ability to improve some results. And I often say that when there's a challenge outside and we make a point the finger and make a judgment, there are 3 fingers pointing right back at us. And so one of the best places that you can start if you're looking to unblock your sales pipeline is to start with you and your perspective on that. But here are the 5 signs that you are potentially sabotaging your success. So the first one is that you're probably focusing more on your budget than you are on the impact that you make. And so when we talk about the budget versus the impact, I think this is a really important concept that a lot of people often miss in the context of their achieving their sales results and for their targets as well. And so I did some work a couple of months ago in an in-house sales team, working with a couple of people who had previously hit some really high budgets, and so their new year-to-date figure for the year was a pretty significant figure, and they wanted to prove to themselves that they could actually hit that target again and make sure that they could get a collective target with their team. And so one of the biggest things that was different when I sat down with this person, I actually recognized what are some of the things that they were doing differently that stopped them from getting the results that they had previously got easily and effortlessly. And upon a little bit of conversation, what we recognized and realized was that previously, when they had been achieving amazing results, they were focusing predominantly on the impact that they were making for their clients, the impact that they were having within their team environment, and what the follow-on effects without really being the offering a service to the customers that they were working with. And so when they focused on offering a service and the impact that that service would actually make as part of the sales process, then the relationship and the rapport was built, and the sale actually became much more seamless. It became a no-brainer. And so for those of you that may or may not know, I published a book called Confident Closing. Originally the title for the book was called Feeding Salt to Horses, because we've all heard the saying that when you lead a horse to water, you can lead a horse to water but you can't make it drink. But if you feed it salt, then by the time you get it to the water, it'll drink because it's a no-brainer and it makes sense because it's thirsty. And so what was happening with this particular client that I was working with was previously he was entering sales engagements, having conversations with them and really focusing on what would be the biggest impact that would be made as a result of them doing business together, not for himself, but actually for the client and the prospect. And so what was happening was there was this real sense of, actually delivering a solution to something that they truly connected with, that they needed. And so often what can happen is when people get promotions or they get accelerations or they get bigger budgets that they need to to meet is that they can sometimes focus on what is the number that they need to produce, and that becomes the sole focus for them as opposed to the relationships they're building. So I really want to encourage you, particularly if you're a business owner and you're responsible still for a lot of the sales that you're doing in your business, then you could be focusing on the revenue and what is the bottom line, in which case then you've probably lost that connection with how you really serve and help your customers. So that's one of the first ways that we sabotage our success. The second way that we sabotage our success is our method that we're doing is no longer delivering any value, or the value that we actually deliver is lacking in terms of the messaging. And one of the things that I often see with people who potentially lose touch with what they're doing is that they often will have scripts or dialogues or a way in which they sell to their audiences. And as business grows and evolves over time, generally some of those old methods don't necessarily work in the same way that they once did, particularly if your business has had a transformation or you've got a different product offering. One of my favorite sayings is the strategy that got you to here is not necessarily going to be the strategy that gets you to that next level. And so you may need to incorporate some different thinking, you may need to make a few tweaks. And so sometimes those scripts and dialogues and the things that we've fallen into the trap of doing because we've done it so often, perhaps aren't working or hitting the mark in the same way as they once did. Or the other thing can be is that because you've done something so repetitiously, you've actually started to miss out on some of the really important things that you actually do as part of that process. And I'll share with you an example. We were working with an organization a few years back who had a document that they followed with a bunch of key questions that they asked the customers to get an understanding of how they could serve and what some of the challenges were. And so they would take this into a discovery meeting and ask these, I think there was about 7 or 8 questions on this discovery call sheet. And some of the more senior salespeople who had been running that sheet for many times or for many years had actually stopped taking that sheet with them as a reference point to go back to ensure that they were asking all of the questions. And we observed a change in the pattern in the results. And so what we started to see was these experienced people were actually starting to have a little bit of a drop off in their ratios between their prospective meeting and also the preparation of a proposal. And when we did some investigation, what we found was that they weren't taking these sheets out with them. And so what was happening was they were actually missing a couple of key questions, which actually got the information from the prospects that they were working with, the real pain points that then enabled them to make a connection to the service they were offering and the pain point that the prospect was experiencing. So it was a really simple thing. We gave them back their sheets as a reference point, and within 2 weeks of actually doing that simple action of putting that sheet back in front of them, they were making sure that they were ticking the boxes. And there's a fabulous reference point here. There's a book called The Checklist Manifesto for anyone who would like to get a little bit more understanding around why it's important sometimes to have a reference guide to be able to check things off. That is a fabulous resource, and I highly, highly recommend it. So as we move into the next area in terms of what's not working, I think that the thing that sometimes gets people standing in the way of their own success is that they bring on some big beliefs that perhaps maybe aren't facts. So beliefs versus facts. And when we talk about the difference between beliefs versus facts, what we start to do is we start to create expectation that we should be creating a certain amount of results. And worse than that, we sometimes start to project inappropriately. An example of a belief that may not be a fact that a lot of salespeople and business owners walk around with is no one wants to talk to me, or people don't want what we have, or we're not competitive in the marketplace, we need to discount our prices. So often what can happen is we create an expectation for ourselves. And this comes back to the first and the second sale when we talk about sales being the number one life skill. And that is that if I don't believe it within myself, then I'm going to be pretty hard pressed to be able to create certainty, trust, and value with someone else if I'm not sold myself. And certainly I have to have the belief that it's possible for me to actually do that if I'm going to go and be convincing and do the second sale, which is where I share my ideas and my thought process in order to be able to get someone enrolled in an idea. Now, you don't always have to be selling a product or a service in order for you to have a really compelling conversation utilizing the second sale. We often talk about, influencing teams and motivating teams, and that often you're not necessarily selling the product to them in exchange for dollars or time or contra, etc. What you're doing is you're getting them enrolled in an idea. And if you're not compellingly convinced, then you're going to have a really difficult time convincing other people that it is in fact something that they need to do. And the fourth thing that we look at here is that often people will fall into the trap of actually saying that they never find the right people. And so if they can't find the right people in the areas that they want to connect with people, then generally they put that blame outside of themselves. And this comes back to what I was saying before around the fact that if I point the finger out there and I make a judgment, generally there's three fingers pointing right back at me. And so if you have teams of people that are running around saying that they can't get through to the people that they need to talk to, or that they never find the right people to connect with. And by the way, if you're a business owner that's looking for a salesperson to add to your sales department, or if you're looking to recruit, I know that there are a lot of business owners out there that have this belief when it comes to recruiting really great quality staff that can achieve their budgets and help them grow and scale their businesses. And so one of the beliefs that gets in the way is that we never find the right people. Also, the final thing in terms of the ways in which we sabotage ourselves is you might actually really find yourself saying that you hate talking to people and you don't like talking to them on the phone, or whether they're hot or cold. And this has got nothing to do with cold calling. I've met a bunch of people that potentially, because of some of the stuff that they haven't been able to achieve in the context of their sales targets and their results, that often they go around, starting to embody this belief that they don't like their prospects and that they don't really want to talk to them because they're time wasters anyway. I remember there was a number of years ago, I was doing a sales training with a couple of people in a small organization, and I sat with them for an afternoon just to see what was their method, what were they doing in the preparation for making calls and connecting with some of their prospects and also their clients, because they were in both an account management role as well as outbound sales role. And so one of the things that I recognized while I was sitting there for the first hour or so was this particular lady that was making the calls. With every time she went to go and find the customer details, I noticed that she did a big sigh. So she would get into the CRM, look for the particular prospect and the client, and then she'd go to pick up the receiver to actually make the call and go, and this happened 2 or 3 more times. And as this happened 2 or 3 more times, I got really curious. And between one of the calls that she was making, I said, as she sighed, I said, "What was that about?" And she goes, "Oh, this person, every time I talk to them, I just feel so overwhelmed because, they're never happy with anything that we do, etc., etc. And, no one's ever happy. And suddenly all these universals were coming out." And so one of the things that can happen over time is if you don't guard your mindset, if you don't guard your focus, then potentially you actually create self-fulfilling prophecies out of the results of your calls and your meetings. And one of the things that I'd like to share as a tip for you today, something that I teach to all of the people that come through our programs, is something that I did intuitively. Now, many of you know that I am in fact a master trainer of neuro-linguistic programming, and so there's a lot of psychology and mindset work that goes into the way in which we teach our sales training and thinking about our belief system and how that impacts the scripts and the dialogues. And my best way to describe it to you is to say that I believe that it's 80-20, as in 80% psychology and 20% strategy, meaning that I could have the best cold calling script in the world, but if I don't have the confidence to pick up the phone in order to make that phone call, then it really doesn't matter how good the script is, because no one's ever going to hear it. Now, this applies in lots of different areas. We've got people who need to do presentations in meetings and they're afraid of public speaking. We've got people who, potentially need to, do some outbound networking, or they need to connect with people on social platforms, and they're worried about being a bore, or they're worried about being pushy, or there's all these mindset beliefs that come up that actually impact the result of how we move forward. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not just about mindset. If I have a really crappy strategy that I'm trying to apply, I could be as positive as I like about it, but I'm still not going to get a result. And so I believe that it's about bridging that gap between the 80% psychology and the 20% strategy, and actually bridging that gap so that we can work those together to create an outcome. And so one of the things that I did intuitively before I became a master practitioner, one of the things that I did intuitively before I became a master trainer of neurolinguistic programming was something that I learned from my grandmother. And I remember many, many years ago, my grandmother used to say, walk in with the right foot. And as I got older, I started to understand that that was about intentionality, and it was literally about starting on the right foot and actually intending and imagining the best possible scenario or the best possible outcome that I could create. And so I started to apply this methodology to a lot of the things that I would do. And I'd actually imagine the things that I wanted to create turning out well before they'd even happened. For example, when I would go to make a call to speak to somebody that I wanted to get a particular outcome with, whether it was a cold call or whether it was a warm call or following up a proposal or speaking with an existing client about something that may have come up, I would always, before I dialed the number, I would think about myself hanging up the phone with the outcome and having had a great conversation with that person, putting my focus and guarding my focus into what I wanted to create. And so when I was speaking with this lady that was sighing every time she had to dial the number, that spoke to me about the fact that the pictures she was making in her head about what was about to happen was already with a negative focus and already potentially going to not necessarily produce the outcome that she wanted. And so when we look at unblocking your sales pipeline, when we look at actually creating the outcomes that we really want to create, the next thing that I really want to bring up with you is, are you encouraging a standing ovation? Or are you encouraging a boo? And so when we talk about the standing ovation versus the boo, one of the things that I often find is that people often will either project onto the situation that it's already failed before it's even started, or they could potentially be talking to the wrong people. And so one of the things that I've included in our workbook here today, and by the way, if you're watching this on my page, then just go ahead and click the button below and you'll be able to access the workbook. We'll make sure we get it out to you. Or if you're watching this in our NLP Sales Mastery Academy, just comment on the comments below workbook and we'll make sure that we get that out to you. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you is that generally when we get a standing ovation and a boo, it's got to do with the way in which we're positioning things. And some of you have heard me speak before about the fact that often we might be speaking to the wrong audience, and the importance of having a niche in terms of qualifying your conversations and making sure that you're talking to the right people, honing in on the right pain points, looking at the right objectives in terms of the goals and the outcomes that they really want to create. And so when we talk about value, often value is in the eye of the beholder. For a lot of salespeople and sales professionals, and even business owners for that matter, often the focus becomes about what are we doing that's of value and how will we get something out of this. And I talk about this consistently in terms of switching the focus around what is the focal point for the sales conversation that is all about what's that person going to get out of it. Because all too often we're focused on how do we measure the value as opposed to how does the person in front of me actually measure the value. Now this actually works two ways, and this is why we're talking about standing ovation or boo. And the reason is because the value actually starts with you and it ends with you. And we've included this in the workbook here, that there was a quite a famous story, you've probably seen it out on social media, around a gentleman who bought a car for his daughter. And he said, I bought you this car as a graduation present and I want you to go and talk to a bunch of people in terms of the worth. And so first and foremost, he sent her off to a dealership and asked about the trade-in value and what the car was worth. And the dealer said, well, it's not worth very much because it's pretty old, it needs a lot of things fixed, etc. And so, it's not really all that valuable to me, and I'll only give you $10,000 for it. And then there's other examples of how they went to the pawn shop and just saw what they could get in, break it up for parts and what they'd actually get for it for that. And then she took it to a car club where they were showcasing a bunch of older cars where they were valued, and the car club said, this is a fantastic car, it's in really good condition, it's going to come up really well, potentially it's worth up to $100,000 because of how rare it is and what good condition it is. And so the moral of the story here is that your worth and your value actually starts with you, but then you have to make sure that if you're going to be sharing that worth and value and the value proposition with another audience, that you're actually speaking to the right people. And so too often I see a lot of really really amazing business owners with great service offering, great products, and they set themselves up so well to help people, yet they haven't defined their niche clearly. And because they haven't defined their niche clearly enough, then they don't get the results that they really want. And so it's a little bit like that metaphor that people talk about, that, you know, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, then it's always going to come up as a failure. And so there are so many people that are inappropriately putting value on the opinions of others that potentially are not their audience. And I see people do this in marketing as well. When they're planning out their marketing, they generally, you know, ask a lot of different people's opinions about what they think about their marketing to try and get that perspective. But the truth is that if I go and take a marketing concept and I offer it for feedback to somebody who is never going to be my client, maybe a friend or a family member that doesn't fit the bill of my ideal client avatar, it doesn't mean that their opinion is not worth anything. It's just probably not necessarily the best opinion that I can gather based on the information that I'm presenting to them, knowing that they don't have the need, they don't have the driver, and they don't fit the bill in terms of the client avatar. And so I really want to encourage you, when you're talking about standing ovations versus boo, then really your audience is key. And so if you're not getting the traction that you need out of the pipeline that you're working at the moment, if it's blocked, it could very well be that your avatar or your audience is the wrong fit for the product or service that you're offering, and they're not necessarily seeing the value. One of my favorite marketing quotes was when they quoted Henry Ford and said that if I had have asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Now, as you know, Henry Ford, a very important person in the way of motor vehicles, and so sometimes we're asking the wrong audience for the wrong feedback, and sometimes we're coming up fueling the itty bitty shitty committee around why what we're doing is not good enough, why the product or the service doesn't meet the mark, why we can't get the results we want, when actually we might be talking to the wrong people. So I really want to encourage you, as part of today's session, to really go back and ask yourself, is the standing ovation that I'm lacking here because I am trying to perform in front of the wrong audience? The other thing that I really want to highlight here is that you want to be able to get your ratios right when it comes to the way in which you actually do this. And so when we start to look at our niche, and we remember a moment ago I talked about the fact that I believe that it's 80% psychology and 20% strategy, and we bridge that gap. The other thing that's really important about the Pareto Principle, which many of you are very familiar with, is the 80-20 principle around not just the psychology and the strategy, but 80% of your results usually will come from 20% of your audience. A lot of the time, 20% of your efforts will deliver 80% of your results. And I see a lot of people being busy. And so when it comes to the psychology, potentially they don't have the right frame of mind. So when it comes to the psychology, their frame of mind is lacking. So when it comes to the frame of mind, their psychology is lacking. So they might be projecting the wrong things, in terms of their successes. It could be that they have limiting decisions or limiting beliefs around whether or not people want to hear from them. It might very well be that perhaps they have the wrong audience, and so they keep getting pushback, and they start to inappropriately assign that information about the no from the customer as being a no to the person taking that personally. Sometimes they don't necessarily have the right strategy. So as part of that, the niche or the audience that they're approaching may be the wrong niche. It might be that the niche finds it highly valuable and that they have a need. However, they may not be able to afford the price point of the product that you're offering. Or it could very well be that you have a better niche that is better traction. Remember that 80% of your results generally come from 20% of the clients. And so what we really want to do is we want to make sure that we're actually creating synergy in what we're doing there. One of the other benefits of making sure that you're niching and unblocking your sales pipeline is around the effort that's required in order to really be across your product information, the areas of expertise from your industry, understanding some of the mechanics and the trends within your industry. If you have one product, then that becomes one message, that becomes one set of objections that are generally handled in that environment. It's one set of marketing messages, it's one set of sales steps and sales suitcase, it's a number of different assets. And these are all things that we teach as part of our Sales Leaders Roundtable Mastermind. And if some of that stuff doesn't make any sense to you at all, then I highly encourage you to take a look into our Ready, Set, Sell program or into our Confident Conversion program, 90 Days to More Cash, More Clients, More Impact. And so when we talk about niching, we look at what's in a product. We talk about the messaging and where you need to communicate that messaging, whether it's through, your marketing is about bringing people to the door, your sales is about helping them walk through it. So what is your messaging? What sets of objections do people normally come up with that you need to be ready to handle? How many different brochures or websites or different things that you use as part of the material that supports your sales process. These are all things that need to be considered to be ready to make the sale. What are some of the things that you do in terms of your onboarding or your contracts or your signing up? What are the ways in which you troubleshoot issues with clients, customer service, etc. And so what we have is a bunch of different things, and there's a whole lot more. I mean, I could spend a whole training session just talking about all the things that we need in order to be able to be ready to take things to market in a way that we're confident, congruent, and we're ready to handle every situation that comes up. When we add that complexity by, say, adding another 4 products or adding another 10 products, what we're doing is we're actually adding that for a number of different products, and we need to have different messages. We get confusion, we start to create a lack of clarity, or we start speaking in abstracts. And when we speak in abstracts, it's one of my favorite sayings, which I learned way back when I was going to BNI, is that if you try and be everything to everyone, then you end up being nothing to no one. And so this is a really important factor, because when it comes to marketing and sales, when you speak in abstracts and you're not able to pinpoint clients' issues along with what are the solutions that actually speak to those issues, you start to talk in abstract concepts. And I see it all the time in the personal development industry. When I was becoming a master trainer of neuro-linguistic programming, I used to coach and train a lot of small business owners that were life coaches or did a lot of personal training, etc. And one of the things that I saw time and time again was when I asked people, what do people get when they work with you? They gave me these abstract concepts. They get empowerment, or, they feel really fit, or, they're really, abundant, and they know that they can. And those are all really great concepts, don't get me wrong. But for somebody like a prospect, that may not connect the dots in terms of what's their measure of that. And so sometimes when I'd ask a bit further, what does empowerment mean specifically? There really wasn't an answer. And remember, when you confuse people, you will lose. And so what we want to be is really clear and have that clarity. So when we multiply the amount of products that we have, then we create a bit of a lack of synergy in our messaging, and we make our work a lot harder for ourselves. And so one of the things that I'd like to share here today as one of the tips that I'd like you to really embrace is to understand that in order for us to really, really unblock the sales pipeline, it's really important to understand that there are 3 key steps around the way in which we do our sales process. And so there's the foundational stuff that we set up in order for us to have the fundamentals of what we need, and I just mentioned some of those in the previous slide. One of those things is around the simple things that you do. And some of you might be surprised to know that some of your pro formas, while I'm not necessarily a big advocate for using scripts word for word, I am a big advocate for having checklists of things that we do that we know create success. And so your pro formas and your checklists will provide a foundation for you to know that you can achieve a particular result. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier in this segment was just talking about the importance of being able to do that. The senior salespeople that I was talking about, who took away their form where they asked those questions, and they suddenly stopped asking 1 or 2 of the questions that really helped them nail the result. The next area is that generally when you start to build on that, you start to create more examples. So you might get an objection. You say, we should do this thing in the sales process, because that's going to help us with this particular client's objection. And then another client gives us another objection. We're going to do these things, and we're going to add this stuff, and we have to do this instead. And so what happens is we create a sense of confusion sometimes. Sometimes we create assets, but sometimes we create confusion, and we move away from the thing that actually was working. Now, the next step of that process is actually to start to refine. And so when we look to refine what it is that we're doing, sometimes it's necessary and it's important to actually take ourselves back to the foundations and look at what was the thing that was really working at the time that actually made that a success. And so as we move move forward, if you're a person who perhaps maybe when you think back to the foundations and you were just winging it and you actually wanted to create some success around this, I really want to encourage you to take a look at a program that we have called Ready, Set, Sell. Or if you're a business owner and you've got some of your team that perhaps need a little bit more structure and need a little bit of a boost around their psychology and the way in which they're approaching that, I really want to encourage you to take a look at our Ready, Set, Sell program. And so when we look at our Ready, Set, Sell program, what we know is that it's a 4-week program, 30 days sales maximizer. And what we find is that people will actually go back to some of the basics, but really hone and refine those. And so our first week is all about know your product and believe in your success. So this is dealing with the psychology. It's really dealing with what are the small actions that actually promote the psychology that you're really looking for. Then we look at week 2, which is about targeting the prize and asking those critical questions that allow us to make the sales process much more seamless, much more effortless, and actually get us to that point of being able to sign off and to close on that value right away. The next element, week 3, is all about sell. This is about really honing and looking at your offering, your pricing, asking for the deal, having the confidence to do that, but also looking at, what are some of the blockers that come up when the way in which we pitch our offer, and how can we refine and define what the offer really is and where the value proposition is. And then in week 4, we look at how do we replicate and celebrate that process. And the program is full and complete with a weekly lesson every week. Everybody gets a text message every day with an action item, and it's about going back to those foundations and refining them and really putting yourself in a position where simplicity then times consistency equals great results. In fact, we had someone just message us this morning who's been through week 2 of the Ready, Set, Sell program, and they've already been able to create over $15,000 worth of new sales just as a result of changing the questioning technique and obviously going through the offer portion right now. So it's about being able to maximize your results, and this isn't a course that you kind of go through and then at the end of it then you hope to be able to implement and to actually to get some results. So what this is about being able to learn a little bit, implement a little bit, learn a little bit, implement a little bit, because all too often so many people go off and do trainings, they get an abundance of knowledge and then they get back to the office and they're like, how in the world do I implement all of this? And so this is one of the areas that I felt really passionate about changing. And so we created small incremental steps that can be applied to any business or any industry, but specific enough that you'll be able to take the information on every single day. There's a daily pep talk, there's daily text, there's obviously our Ready, Set, Sell monthly maximizer call as part of the program as well. And so if that's for you and you think maybe you might like to take a look at that, then feel free to go ahead and use the QR code on the screen here and find out a little bit more about the program and how you can get involved. So if you're a founder, or a sales professional that is potentially making 30K a month, or you've got teams that are selling, then this is a great fundamental way to actually start to build your scalable sales system. If you are a person who is currently selling and you need a little bit of a refresher in the context of the way that you sell, then this is definitely a place for you to go to really, form those firm foundations, look at, cutting out the mess, go back to those little 1%ers and certainly refine what it is that you're doing so you can really maximize your conversion ratio. And so as we move forward, I think it's really important to recognize that if you want to unblock your sales pipeline, the first thing that you need to do is you need to unblock yourself. And so what are the crappy beliefs that you have? What are some of the 1%ers, the little actions that you do consistently that actually get you those results? And how can you revisit that? Most importantly, if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more of them, then I really encourage you to come and join us over in our NLP Sales Mastery Academy community. This is a group where I go live every week. If you're already a member, then kudos to you. And you're probably enjoying this video because you are a member. If you're not a member yet, then I really encourage you to go over there. We've got 3 quick questions for you to fill out. Love for you to fill those out and come and join us over in the community. And again, if you are ready and you are set and you're going to sell, then certainly I'd love to invite you into our Ready, Set, Sell program. So guys, I trust that this has been useful for today. I'm certainly looking forward to hearing your comments and your feedback. You may even want to post a little takeaway below if you're watching this on the page. And if you've got any questions, then please reach out to us. And until we meet again, it's Shondell from Life Puzzle. Be well and be empowered. Bye for now.